and good afternoon. Welcome to this episode today. Um, I'm so glad to be with you every week, and today we are going to talk about the subject universe. And some of you may be wondering, what does the subject of universe have to do, after all, with the subject of spirituality? And the answer is the origin of this universe is one of the core questions for anyone who is making a decision regarding the truth of his worldview. It is very important for us to answer the question of how did this world come to be in the first place. Also, regarding the personal issues like who am I, what does my life mean, what am I created for, and all of these questions, somewhere at the context, at the backdrop of this question is uh, how did this whole thing get created? Who created it after all? Was it, and is this world a result of some random accidental incidents over a period of time, or is this a result of a deliberate act of a designer, of an intelligent designer, who, in my worldview, who is God Himself, the creator of the heavens and the earth? So, this question we will deal with from the perspective of science, from the perspective of scriptures, from the perspective of philosophy. Now, let me read a verse from the Bible as we begin. And this is an author of a psalm, David, and Psalm chapter 8. He wrote this song in worship of God. In verse 3, he says, "When I look at your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars which you have set in place, what is man that you are mindful of him, and the Son of Man that you care for him?" The connection which the psalmist makes seems a little bit strange. And what does the psalmist get to know about his value when he sees the heavens, the skies, and the sun and moon and the stars? What does he, how does this connect? How does he, how does his understanding about the nature and the universe around him impact his own personal theology? So, another one, the same author probably he wrote, and he writes in Psalm 19, he says, "The heavens declare the glory of God. The sky above proclaims his handiwork. Day to day pours out speech, and night to night reveals knowledge." There is no speech, which means no language, uh, uh, nor are there words whose voice is not heard. Their voice goes out through all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. In them he has sent a tent for the sun. So he's comparing now, he's looking at the sky, and then now he's looking at the sun. And he says, "Which comes out like a bridegroom leaving his chamber, and like a strong man runs its course with joy. Its rising is from the end of the heavens, and its circuit to the end of them, and there is nothing hidden from its heat." So this man is meditating on this fact that the beautiful sky, the sun, the sunset, the sunrise, all of it is in some way reflection of the glory of God. This is teaching this man, as this man looks at the sky and the sun, he's learning something about God. So this is the beginning point, and I'm raising that question again, that your worldview about life, about God, about human psyche is dependent, is very, very connected with your worldview regarding the origin of this universe. So, and I'm going to another portion of the Bible in a little while, but many of us, as we went to our schools and we studied, and some of us studied science very actively. Some of us may also have a very scientific mind, and you might be thinking about things. And we heard of terms like evolution. And what evolution proposes is that this world is basically in its current form came from a series of events. It also calls them permutations, and these series of destructive events occurred over long periods of time and produced many changes. And starting from just a lump of mass, this whole world, through the Big Bang, whatever it is called, the Big Bang theory, and this whole world was set in motion, and over a large period of time, we reached where we are. And in a sense, there is no governing factor, there is no creator, but rather just accidents. There's just a series of random uh, events. Now, a lot of us have actually believed it. We it doesn't we almost think as if this is science. Now let me say this. um, you know, if you want to know the truth about the origin of God, we have to establish this one fact early on, that none of us were present, including the man who wrote the book which led to the idea of evolution or the idea of Big Bang theory. Even that man wasn't present in the beginning. Number two, uh, in science, sometimes when you are not present at the moment of the incident, the other approach is that you get into a laboratory, perform the simulate the situations, and try to arrive at the similar result. And if you do it enough number of times, then the experiment is called successful, and then your theory is validated and it becomes a real science. If you remember, in your science classes, in your ninth and 10th standard, you were taken by your science teacher to a laboratory, and you were called to perform experiments, and that's how you arrived at your conclusions. This is how science is supposed to work. But unfortunately, when it comes to the subject of creation of the world, somehow we bypass those rules. Number one, the person present, we don't ask him the question, what happened. Number two, we don't have a way to perform a simulation of or a laboratory experiment for evolution, neither for Big Bang theory. However, in the Bible, the condition number one is met. The only one who was really present at the time of the creation of the universe is God Himself, who created it. And in the Bible, in Genesis chapter 1 and 2, the story is written. God created the heavens and the earth. So this is how Bible begins. This is in fact the beginning of the whole Bible. This is Genesis chapter 1 verse 1. It says in the beginning. Now wait for a moment. It says in the beginning. In the beginning of what? In the beginning of everything. What was there before the beginning? That's a question. Because, and in my biblical worldview, the answer to that question is only God. Before the beginning, there was eternity, and only God was present. There was no time, no space, only eternity. Now, here is the beginning of time and space. Here is the beginning of material things. Now, when we talk about creation, uh, whichever worldview it is, it has to answer this question. Whatever God created, what it got created from, which means we have this material universe, It's made of substance. And before this universe came into being, what was the material used to produce it? So there are three essential worldviews about it. Any religion, any variety of worldviews, they incorporate one of the three. One is called creation of material things from the material things, which means there was something from which this world was created. The other is which is pantheistic worldview. It says there was God, and from God came all of the material things. The third one is creation ex nihilo, which means creation from nothing. There was nothing. God created this material world from nothing. So here it is. It says, I will read a few verses. In verse 3, it says, and God said, let there be light. All God had to do was think of this, what he wants to make, and he said the word, and the thing came into being. Like later on, it says again in verse 6, and God said, let there be an expanse in the midst of waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters. And God made the expanse and separated waters from the waters. In verse 10, God said, let the earth sprout vegetation, plants yielding seed, and fruits, trees bearing fruit, etc., etc. And it was so. So this is interesting, and this goes on, and I'm not going to read it for you. And it would be, it would be good if you go and read it yourself. The whole is just 2 chapters, but the point is, God kept on saying things, and things started coming into being from nothing. God did not need an existing material to produce this universe. God absolutely created it from nothing, and God designed it. Now, I take you to another portion of scripture, and this is very interesting because this is a book of Job. This is a man named Job who with whom God was having conversation. And if you are aware of this chapter, this book of the Bible, this is a story of a very good man, a godly man who got attacked by the devil. He did not know it, but he had to suffer. He had to suffer great losses. He was suffering from personal disease. He was suffering from almost like facing death, and he was also suffering from mental depression because of that. And he was asking a lot of questions in his life. And at the end of the conversation, he had few friends there trying to console him, trying to also judge him, and ultimately God comes into the scene. And I don't have much to say about Job today, but what God talked to Job is very interesting for us to understand the universe. Here God says, first God rebukes Job and says, come on, how much do you understand? Who are you? Right? Are you really wise? And that's how God addresses it. And then he says in verse 4 of Job chapter 38, and this is where a series of rhetoric questions are asked by God. Rhetoric questions mean God is asking the question, and an answer is so obvious. He's not wanting an answer, but he wants Job to agree with the obvious answer. He says, where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? Tell me if you have understanding. Good question. I think this question needs to be asked by to all the so-called scientists. God may ask the question, where were you when I created this universe? Were you there? You're talking as if you are expert. But God is saying, tell me, who determined its measurements? Surely you must be knowing. This is how God says. Or who stretched the line upon it? On what base was it sunk? Who laid its cornerstones? Then he says, when or who shut the sea with doors when it burst out from the womb? It's very poetic book. It's poetry, so you have to enjoy that poetry part of it. Then he says, "When I made clouds its garments and thick darkness its swaddling band." He's talking about sea. God is talking. When I made the sea, I put boundaries around the sea, and I put darkness around it. In the night, it is dark, and the darkness became its clothing. And then he talks about, and clouds became its garments. And then he says, I prescribed limits for it. So God has put a limit. Where will Indian Ocean end? And where will Pacific Ocean end? This is what God is claiming. And then he says in verse 12, listen to this. He says, have you commanded the morning since your days began? God is asking the question, which means God is saying, Job, I command the morning. One time I remember one of my favorite authors making this quote in one of his books. He says, many times when I'm walking in the morning and I see the sunrise and I'm amazed, and then I stop and I thank God and I say, God did it again for me. Every sunrise, sometimes we need to develop that sense of wonder. um, we get so familiar, we get familiar with the breaths we breathe, we get familiar with the days we live on this earth. But God is saying, have you ever commanded the morning? And then he says later on in verse 16, I mean, I'm passing a few verses, but have you entered into the springs of the sea? Have you seen the deep things, the fishes there, the sea? And then he says, have the gates of death been revealed to you? Do you understand anything about death? Has man capability to stop death with all its modern medical science? We can maybe prolong life a little bit, but there is no medication for death. Have you seen the gates of deep darkness? These are the questions God is asking. In verse 22, he says, have you entered the storehouses of the snow? Or have you seen the storehouses of the hail, which I have reserved for the time of trouble, for the day of battle and war? So God is trying to say that I am the one who controls hail and snow as well. Oh my God. Later on, he says in verse 22, has the rain a father? Ha, wonderful. Or who has begotten the drops of dew? Who has begotten the drops of dew? Do you understand? Like in the winter is coming, and some of you who have the privilege to be a little bit more near nature, and I remember my childhood, or the grass outside my in our courtyard, and in the winter mornings there would be dew on the grass, and God is saying, uh, uh, who has begotten these dews? Every drop of dew, right? We are verse 31, he says, can you bind the chains of the Pleiades or loosen the cords of Orion? These are the constellations he's talking about. Do you know the ordinances of the heavens? Can you establish their rule on earth? Can you lift up your voice to the clouds that a flood of water may cover you? Can you command the clouds and clouds will rain? But God is saying, I command the clouds and cloud rain. Now, you know, you may say, why are you reading all these words? Friends, these are words of God spoken to a man. And God is being very specific. God is telling something about his creative activity, something about things which go on in the world around us. We are familiar with the rain and dew and snow and hail and all of these. And God is saying, listen, I command them. I am the one who create those. I am the one who designed those. Let's go further. In chapter 39, verse 1, he says, do you know when the mountain goats give birth? Wow. So God knows. He's saying, he's claiming to know that every delivery, human beings go and get admitted in the nursing homes and hospitals to get the babies delivered, but nobody admits mountain goats. Nobody keeps record of them. But God is saying, Job, do you know when the mountain goats give birth? Do you observe the cawing of the doors? So even the birds are giving birth, and he knows. Can you number the months that they fulfill? And do you know the time when they give birth? Wow. Who has let the wild donkey go free? Who has loosened the bonds of the swift donkey? To whom have I given the arid plain for his home and the salt land for his dwelling place? So he's talking about a wild donkey, and he says, I have given him the place where he lives. Okay? So he didn't go and do registration in your registration department, but he has also been given the land. Beautiful. Now, let's go further. Is the wild ox willing to serve you? Is he going to listen to your command? Will he spend the night at your manger? Can you bind him in the furrow with ropes? Or will he harrow the valleys after you? Verse 13, he says, the wings of the ostrich wave proudly, but they are the pinions and plumage of love. 19, do you give the horse his might? Do you clothe his neck with mane? Wow, wonderful. And God goes on and on and on. My point is, my friends, God is claiming something in these verses. And I hope I'm able to communicate to you. And we will go to the practical realms to understand this a little bit more. God is claiming his creative activity and his authority as the creator and the designer of this universe into details, the tiny details of the skies and nature and animal life and human beings. Everything is designed by him, everything is sustained by him on a daily basis. God commands this universe to run. This is amazing. This is beautiful. We sometimes we think it's all in auto mode, but it's not in auto mode. God is claiming, and it's not me who I'm claiming. And probably I'm also trying to get a little bit more grasp of it. And next week we will talk about this absolutely the design. The topic of next week is design, like God's design. And but at the moment, let's consider a few things. There is this whole big debate about whether this universe is a result of intelligent design. And but that's a very important argument to consider. And this is a very traditional argument, but I'm going to bring it to you anyway. Like, if you have a watch, and you know if you find a watch and you look at the watch and you think about this question, who made this watch? Or maybe, could this watch be here without being made or designed? Could it be just a series of accidental parts getting together and coming together to become a watch? And the most cases, the logical answer would be no. There must be somebody who designed this watch. There must be somebody who created it, who thought about it. And it's a complex. It has a various parts. What does that design entail? It has to have many parts working together towards a common goal, a very intended purpose, and there is a sense of complexity in it. But now look at the universe around us. Don't you see a sense of complexity? Don't you see something being worked together? Don't you see a coherence? Use the word in science called ecosystem. And this is like many components working together, and somebody put them in their correct place. How can we not look at this universe and think about this question: who made it? Who designed it? How can we ignore that question? There is an intelligent God in this world. Just because I see only the watch and I haven't got to see the watchmaker doesn't rule out the existence of the watchmaker. And very much so, when we see this complex universe working in coherence together. It's not a blast. It's a coherent universe. We can definitely know that there is a watchmaker. Let's look at some of those things. Have you ever thought of something called DNA? Like, have you? I mean, I'm talking to people who are familiar with science and probably with the internet and all. We all become familiar. I'm an engineer, and I am fascinated by machines and automation and efficiencies, to the extent that I spoil some of the earphones of my house trying to repair them, on a lighter note. But you know um, DNA, if you think about it, the amount of information a DNA contains about a human being is more information than than your fastest computer you have ever used. Can you say we admire Microsoft and we admire Apple, um, Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, awesome men, masters in their fields, great designers. We admire them in our society. But what about the person who created the DNA? Is he not worth the admiration? We fly in flights, and we are so thankful that in my childhood, when the scientists who invented certain things, we had to memorize that list. I remember memorizing the name of Wright brothers. They invented the aeroplanes. Have you thought about it? Yes. What would have it taken to design that aeroplane? Now we live in an era of Boeings and jets and modern airplanes and big capacities and all that. I'm sure what Wright brothers invented was very basic, but it worked. They were the first ones. Before that, human beings flying in jets was impossible. It took years of science to arrive at that. But can you consider the tiny sparrow which walks, which it comes to your balcony in the morning? She has wings, and somebody designed those arms and muscles and the joints and the capacity of the wing, and it is so accurate. She flies so effortlessly, and the eagle and the hawk and all of it. If we admire brothers and Boeings, we will do well to admire the creator of those birds. Have you thought of ants? You know, I'm reading an article from Science Today, and it's amazing. The scientists have done research about the behavior of ants. This is what it says: the social behavior of ants continues to amaze scientists with its complexity and efficiency of organization and design. In a new study, scientists have shown how ant communities foraging for food and other resources embody a complex system of behavior and path marking that creates an optimized search with minimal waste of energy and time. The information gleaned from this study was then applied to the design of computer search algorithms. My dear friends, we live in 21st centuries. We are internet people. We use search engines. We are talking about artificial intelligence and many such things. But do you know something? God designed ants with search algorithms. with capability of artificial intelligence. We cannot afford to ignore that God. You know, this is amazing. And I want to provoke you. And next week, as we come, we will take this subject forward. And this is going to be amazing. We'll study it a little bit, we'll deep dive more. We will, because this God is an intelligent God. You know, one time I asked the question to a group of people whom I was talking to, and and it's a very simple question, but think about it. Can God use laptop? Can God use your laptop? Interesting, isn't it? Sometimes we think of God as some far-fetched being, an outdated, somewhere back there, a remote idea, a religious idea. No, God is a person, and He is an intelligent person, and He is much more intelligent than what we can imagine. He gave us the brain to invent the laptop. That's amazing. Next week we will talk about this design aspect a little more, like design of this universe. We'll dwell into it. We will look at the some of the fascinating facts of this universe to show us how perfectly fit what mind has created this universe. Thanks, Joseph, for those comments, and thanks everybody else for joining. I hope you are enjoying these episodes. See you next week, and have a great week ahead. Lots of blessings for you. Welcoming the Christmas month. We are right in the beginning of December. I've used my weekend to set up my Christmas tree a little bit. Looking forward to it. God bless you.